part of the reason for that trip. Yay. So, yeah, my life has been just crazy. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and the son of a funeral director, actually fourth generation funeral director as a young man. And true story, I ran off and joined the circus when I was 24, a juggler, and I did that for a while. Disney for a bunch of years, worked in entertainment there. Um, but it was at Disney that I met my wife. So 1985, I went to Disney and we were working. Well, I was working in entertainment. She was there. She's Chinese. She was there on a 1 year program, like a cultural representative from China, working at the China Pavilion at Epcot. And anyway, we met at an event. And if I can, I just have to share this story of how we met because it, it's really kind of fun. So we had problems with the employees at the China Pavilion messing with the characters. So my job at the time was I was in costume. I was Chip and Dale. And Chip and Dale wore these cute little Chinese costumes at the China Pavilion, little Chinese hat and little vest that said double happiness on it. Anyway, the employees there were so excited when we would come out in the park that they would run out and they would pull on us and poke and knock. And so anyway, we ended up doing this session with the employees behind stage backstage, and kind of introduced him to the performers and said, okay, these are the costumes and this is why you shouldn't try to poke them in the eye or, try and lift the head and look at the performer underneath when they're out on stage greeting guests. So anyway, that introduction, spending that time with the employees there, the cast members, as we call them at Disney, got us an invite to this event in the fall called the Autumn Festival or Harvest Moon Festival, depending on what you want to call it. So this was all new to me. I had very little exposure to Chinese culture growing up. So I signed up. I said, oh, sure, I'll go to this event. Sounds like fun, And I was at this little kind of resort area at Disney that at the time they had reserved for cast members. Later it opened to the public, but it's called Little Lake Bryan. And so we went to this event. There was only a couple of non-Chinese there. I was one of it, just two or three of us Westerners. And they had all this food on this table and nobody was eating. And so I finally asked them, I said, why is all this food there, but nobody's eating? And they said, the elders are playing mahjong and we have to wait for them to finish. When they finish their game, then we'll eat. I said, oh, okay. So a little bit later, there's this announcement made in Chinese, and this just a free for all. As soon as that announcement was made, it's just everybody rushing for the food. So I go in there. I'm like 25 years old at the time, right? So I go in, elbowing my way in. I grab a couple things, and I go and sit down with my little plate. Yeah, I didn't know what I was eating. Anyway, so this beautiful young Chinese woman comes over with a plate of food. I get emotional just telling this. And she says, you didn't get the good stuff. Let me show you. So she sits down and explains the food and feeds me basically. And I mean, my heart just went boom, 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 boom. This woman was so sweet and kind and beautiful. So anyway, that was in the fall of 1985. In January 1986, I asked her to marry me. Um, and we were married in the fall of 1986. So this year, 2026, is our 40th wedding anniversary. We have managed to stay together all this time.
Congratulations. I love hearing stories where there's success like that, especially around Disney, right? Like you hear about like these Disney marriages, Disney themes in the movies, right? And here you are,
Yeah,
your own version of the Disney magic.
yeah. Well, what's fun too is I got in on this. There's a group in Facebook for folks who worked at Disney in like the 70s and 80s or something, or maybe it's 80s and 90s. I don't know. But there are so many stories like mine on there where people, come on and say, "Oh yeah, I met my wife or I met my husband, back in the 80s and we're still together." So there's a whole bunch of us that are Disney couples who've been together for 30 or 40 years.
So let me ask you then, Eric, when you two met under the circumstances that you did, was it love at first sight, or was it something else, or maybe a combination of the two?
I think it was for me, not for her. You know, I was this anomaly for her, right? This strange American man who doesn't look like a typical American, right? Their picture of an American is this big, hairy guy, and I'm like 5'4". We laugh now. We say I'm kind of I'm white on the outside, but I'm Asian on the inside. Um, I yeah, I didn't fit the mold of a typical, American man from her perspective. So yeah, I think she was just, kind of curious. Who is this guy? And and I'm kind of playful and fun. At the time, I was doing a Disney character was my day job, but I was a professional juggler, and performing, in the evenings and weekends and stuff. So, yeah, I guess I was a kind of an odd character there, literally. And yeah, she took a liking to me. So we dated for a bit, and the more I got to know her, I mean, I was all in, you know. Well, and actually, and the engagement was kind of funny too, almost like I tricked her without realizing it. I gave her a ring. She accepted the ring, put the ring on, but she didn't know what it meant. She didn't realize that it was a commitment to get married. We had kind of talked about marriage, but yeah, she didn't realize that accepting the ring was an official engagement till she went to work and people saw the ring and started congratulating her and asking her when we were going to get married. And then she comes home and she's like, "Hey, what's going on here? Why is everybody congratulating me?" And I explained it to her and she kept the ring. Yeah.
Was it one of those things where when you put the ring on the person's finger, it shrinks a little bit so they can't get it off?
No, no, in fact, actually, she lost the ring. Um, later. I had to replace it, but yeah.
When you look back on how you two met and then the both of you dated and then you eventually got married, I know sometimes some people, especially these days, it seems, right, where there's a little bit of a struggle. Everything is really good in the dating experience. Then when they get married, they maybe have to adapt to each other's needs or maybe each other's values or morality or morals, whatever the situation is. For you and her, two different cultural backgrounds. What's something that you learned about yourself that kind of surprised you when it came to adapting to someone that's a little bit different when it comes to culture?
Boy, so much there. I mean, it yes, it was very different being married to a Chinese woman, but different but better, right? I mean, their kind of family values and, once she'd made this commitment, this was truly a lifetime commitment. And so, yeah, there was absolutely a lot of stuff to work through. There were clashes in culture and, yeah, there was, well, the hardest part for me early on was when our son was born and her parents came to stay with us to help with the baby, and that was pretty rough. um, her mother her mother viewed it as this was her job, baby was her job, not my job. Dads don't do baby stuff. So I wanted to be all hands on. I'm going to change diapers and take care of my new infant son. And pretty much if I picked up that baby, she rushed over and took the baby from me. Right. This was not my job. This was her job. Right. Baby cried. I wanted to respond. She would knock me out of the way so she could get to the baby and take care of the baby. Um, and so, yeah, that was challenging. um, just kind of accepting that they're here for a while, and I got to kind of step aside and let her mother do her thing. Um, the other thing that's challenging there, different maybe than our culture, what I grew up with, is um, the level of respect for your parents basically means that if they want to do that, um, you let them do that. Even if you don't necessarily want them to do that, um, you respect your elders. And so, another just kind of interesting perspective from me on her father. So, her father, um, old school. These they're both still alive, by the way. We see them regularly. He's now 94, she's 90. But anyway, in their culture, the oldest male is kind of head of the household. So he comes to our house in the US to live with us. And again, my perspective, they kind of looked at the American culture as not really being culture at all. That, the Chinese culture is so rich and lengthy, Americans we're infants in the world of culture. And so it was almost this sense that they felt the need to bring their culture to our house. Right. And so he kind of took over like he was head of the household now, and they wanted to set up a little Buddha shrine in our, living room. And yeah, this was problematic for me. It's like, no, 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 dude, my house. Right? You know, you don't rearrange the furniture. You don't go, do stuff without asking me, right? He'd spent most of his life on a boat, um, or a little tiny apartment in Hong Kong. And so being in a single family home was also all new to him. And so this experience of large spaces and say a freestanding building for a house was all new experience. And he breaks stuff. He was just clumsy. Seemed like I kept finding tools broken and stuff, hoses that don't work anymore, leaking and whatever, because yes, he was manhandling all this stuff, trying to figure out what it was and how to use it. But the funniest story in retrospect was he kept seeing on the news reports, this was in Florida, of these mosquito-borne diseases and stuff, right? And they have warning about mosquitoes. And I come home from work one day and he's standing in my living room. He has found what he thought was just bug spray was actually a bug bomb that we were going to use potentially at another property to, well, it was empty, to just make sure it was clean of bugs. He was trying to figure out how to release this thing in my living room because there was a mosquito on the porch on the outside of the door. And I realized what he was doing. I was like, oh my God, give me that can. I opened the sliding door. I went out and I went whack and killed the mosquito on the window with my hand. And he was just horrified, that I had just gone out there and killed the mosquito. And I kind of, he spoke English. His wife, my mother-in-law, doesn't speak English at all, really. But he spoke enough English for me to tell him, don't ever touch this thing again. We'd all be staying in a hotel, if you had managed to release that thing in the house. But yeah, it was a difficult period, but then they went back to Hong Kong, and I kind of took over as dad for my son, and they didn't come back again until he was about 3 years old, I guess, their next visit. And it went much better the second round, and I love her parents. In fact, we moved to Hong Kong partly because they were getting older and she wanted to be closer to them. And so, yes, in fact, we lived across the street from them for the first 7 or 8 years we were here in Hong Kong. Saw them a lot.
How were you able to meet your in-laws where they were as you guys were getting further on in your marriage?
Meet them where they were.
Yeah,
Um,
I could give you an example. Let's say you gave the differences in the culture, how there was roles that they were accustomed to, but maybe it was a little different now. So when you realize that, how were you able to make them comfortable and meet them where they're at to have that type of conversation, let them know that I'm capable to do these things as well?
yeah, so I think the only well, maybe the real difference was when they came back when my son was 3, they saw that I was a good father. And, my son adored me. He was a daddy's boy from the time he was little. He responded to me, and um, they also saw that I was hardworking. I, loved my wife, their daughter, and, we had a good home and we're comfortable. And so, yeah, it's always been, I guess, about mutual respect from there, right? They didn't feel like, oh, we have to compensate for Eric being an American, right? That her daughter has married outside of her culture. I think they stopped feeling like, there was just something missing there that they had to compensate for. Um, and Yeah, they love me. I love them. It's really been pretty easy since that very initial time when they came to live with us. But that is part of their culture too, right? So my wife's brother, when he finished high school, um, came to the U.S. to go to college and stayed with us for like a year. And it wasn't even a conversation, right? It was just, oh, by the way, my brother's coming. He's going to go to college. He's going to live with us. I was like, oh, okay. This isn't a decision we're, going to make. I don't get a voice in this. And it was basically, it was, she was saying, no, 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 my family decided this, right? My wife didn't decide this. Her family, her parents, her sisters all kind of got together and said, yeah, Ron needs to go to school, in the U.S. Opportunity. So Kitty, you're going to host him. And so yeah, it wasn't up for discussion at all. He just came, and yeah, he stayed with us for about a year. It was a little rough at times, but um, but then later, her younger sister also came, and Tammy stayed with us like 3 years, I think, something like that. Tammy was a very different story than Ron. Tammy really kind of integrated into the household. We had, uh, Evan was young at that point. She was hugely helpful with babysitting and helping out. Yeah, Tammy stayed on. She still lives in Orlando. We go see her, regularly, and we've been very, very close. Her brother ended up in Atlanta. Um, we don't see him as often, but you know, he's a brother. We're close as folks get, I guess, when you live across the world and you don't see each other, but every couple of years.
From your side of the family, what are some of the differences that you notice in comparison?
Oh, my family, um, well, my family certainly accepted, Kitty right away. There was no problem there. Um, she's always felt, I think, a little bit um, out of the loop. My family's a little different. I have two brothers, no sisters, and neither of my brothers ever got married, so they don't have families. So it's a very different family type than hers, right? She had, 4 siblings. Her parents are like, I think her mother's one of 10 children, her father's one of 11 children, something like that. So these huge families with all these kids and cousins. And so for her, family is this massive, she didn't even know all her cousins, I think, right? They still pop up and she'll say, oh yeah, I got this cousin who's in Singapore now. And you're like, okay, I've never heard of this cousin, right? Um, and even, in my parents' family, right? Both of my parents, my mother and father, each had one sibling, a sister. And, so very small family circle for us growing up. So yeah, a little different. And, my brothers went off and did their thing. I went off and did my thing. We were never very close as, you know, I was living in Florida doing my thing. And, So yeah, very different kind of family feel on my side, but yeah, they've always been accepting of our relationship and happy for us and supportive.
I remember looking back on my own dating experience and my relationships. There was a time where, because I love sushi, right? And I remember when I was dating someone, she was born in Japan, her family was Japanese. And the beautiful thing about that situation is that
Hmm.
I've always had an appreciation for that culture growing up. So when I was dating her at that time and I started to learn about it from a direct source and the family, it started to highlight things in my life that I really liked and things that I didn't know that I did like. I was like, "Oh, okay, I like that." And one of them was sushi,
Hmm.
which I still love to this day. And then I began to learn so much about myself through the experience of someone who had a different culture than I did growing up. And I always valued that because I don't know if I would have discovered that if I didn't have that situation. For
Yeah.
you, what's something that you learned about yourself that you really either appreciated or loved because you're in a marriage with someone that grew up a little bit differently than you did?
Oh, almost everything. You know, it's we grew up in such completely different worlds. I grew up in rural Western Mass, literally on what had been a farm. It was all woods and fields, and you could barely see a neighbor's house from our house, right? Say, son of a funeral director. Um, she grew up in a 400 square foot flat in Hong Kong with, say, four siblings, her parents, and I think her grandmother living with them, right? Oh, in this little tiny space. And this was the standard of living there. I mean, this was not because they were poor or anything. This was just, this is how people lived, in Hong Kong. And so, yeah, more people in her building than in my entire hometown, right? So just completely different experiences, growing up. I never, I think maybe once or twice before I was 20 did I ever even eat Chinese or Asian food. We just had no exposure to that culture at all growing up. And so yeah, so everything has changed. Being married to an Asian woman, I made my first trip to Hong Kong in 1989, um, and yeah, that was crazy. We were there. We were in Hong Kong when the Tiananmen Square thing happened in China, so we got to see the reaction in Hong Kong, like 1 million people going out to protest. Um, so yeah, so some crazy stuff. But um, boy, yeah, it's changed me completely. I have such a different view of the world now, and that, sorry, but America is not the center of the universe. There are, so many other cultures and ways to live and languages and stuff that yes, it's really broadened my view of the world and the need for diversity, that how much we gain from exposure to other people and other customs um, and I don't speak Chinese. So all these years, this is one real sore spot for my wife, I guess, is she has been trying to teach me Cantonese for 40 years, and I still can't hold a conversation in Cantonese. Um, it is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. Um, that's an excuse. I actually tried pretty hard for a long time, and I just butchered the language. It has like 8 tones, so any sound can have like 8 different meanings depending on how you say it. Ma 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 ma. You know, ma can mean horse. It can mean mother. It can mean it's a question. It's really hard and very subtle to get the all those different tones right. And I don't hear it very well either. I'm kind of tone deaf. I just don't recognize the tones. And so anyway, yeah, language is not my talent. And she speaks four languages, um, just natural to her. That's another difference actually culturally there, right? From the time she was 3 years old, she was speaking Cantonese and English. It was still a British colony at the time, Hong Kong, and so they learned English as soon as they started school. Everything was done in English. So to be bilingual at least was completely normal. In her case, her parents also spoke a different dialect from China, from their villages that they came from. And so she didn't speak that dialect, but she could hear it and understand it. So, yeah, interesting. Her parents, their conversations were quite often their parents speaking in one dialect and them responding in Cantonese. They understood each other, but they were speaking two different languages to each other. Um, but she learned French in college, and I studied Spanish for like 7 years. Still can't speak it fluently. She took like 3 semesters of French, and she can still speak it pretty comfortably. All these years later, she can just flip her brain back to French. Yes, a talent I'm envious of, but I do not have. And that has been inconvenient, I will say. Socially, business wise, I don't need to speak Chinese to survive in Hong Kong and work. But socially, it's a liability. I go to events, family gatherings and stuff, and they're all the way in Cantonese, and I can't keep up. I sit there and, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but you know, I'll sit here and appear to be smiling and entertained. Um,
That's one thing I've noticed where, because you and I were talking earlier about traveling, is that English seems to be in every part of the world pretty much at this point. But yeah, if I could, I learned French a little bit. I can speak it a little bit. I wish I stuck with it because I was born in the French part of Canada where I am now. It's just I left when I was 5, so I didn't actually go to school there. But learning a second language when you're early on in your life like that is so beneficial if you want to pick up another one later on in life.
yeah. Well, we tried to teach our kids Cantonese, right? We have a son and a daughter, and in fact, actually, that was one of those those moments, interesting moments. So when my in-laws came back when my son was 3, and I still remember this, we're sitting around the kitchen table, having a meal, and my mother-in-law is trying to get my son to speak Cantonese to her. And he finally, he's 3 years old, and I swear I didn't prompt this or anything. He looks at my in-laws and says, I am not Chinese. I have brown hair like my dad. He had picked up on the fact that all of the Chinese people he met who spoke Chinese had like jet black hair, and his hair was brown. And my hair, which is no longer brown, but it was at the time, um, was a light brown. And so this had clicked for him that yes, brown hair meant English speaking, and black hair meant Chinese speaking. And needless to say, my in-laws were not happy with that answer. I am not Chinese. But anyway, yeah,
Let me
he
ask you then,
regrets
when
it.
you,
Yeah, he regrets that he
well,
didn't learn Chinese. Yeah,
yeah, I can see kids because it goes back to like just trying to attach yourself to an identity, which and a lot of us when it looks like identity, it's like, okay, who looks the most similar to me?
yeah.
Right. And it doesn't seem like it was malicious intent. It's just this is what I see and this is
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
gonna latch onto at that point. Right.
yeah.
When you decide to make that move, as I'm gonna call it in the name of love, right? And there's a song like that. When you decide to make that move, what was your thought process, let's say intellectually as well as emotionally?
Which move are we talking about? The move to Hong Kong?
Yes.
Okay, the move to Hong Kong. So this was something we had talked about um, off and on for years, and considered. We knew, sadly. So my wife is brilliant. Say speaks four languages, unbelievably smart woman, but her career was limited in the US because of prejudice, right? Discrimination. She, you know, she went to work at a hotel, walked in there, say, beautiful Asian woman with a degree in hospitality management from one of the top schools, and done an internship with one of the top hotels in the world in Hong Kong. And she walks in and they offered her a job as a seating hostess in the Japanese restaurant because she was Asian. you know, and it was just like, oh my God, you're just like missing the boat here. She could be running one of your restaurants, and instead you make her a seating hostess. And she did move up, pretty quickly. They realized that yeah, she was smart and capable and ambitious, and you know, and then yeah, a few months later, she was I guess a supervisor kind of lead or something in one of their other restaurants, and they brought in a new manager who was this white guy right out of college who had absolutely no idea what he was doing and completely dependent on her. And so but this was the reality of her 27 years in Florida, was that no matter where she went, no matter how smart and talented and capable she was, she still had a little bit of a Chinese accent, and people immediately they looked at her, heard her voice, and categorized her as, you know, Asian. You're not part of this circle of white guys, who get promoted. So anyway, so we talked about, yeah, she goes back to Hong Kong. She's a rock star, right? Got all this experience in the US and still speaks Cantonese, now speaks Mandarin. Um, you know, her English is beautiful. I always laugh. Her English is better than mine. And so, yeah, so in 2012, we hit this kind of milestone where our son was graduating from college. Our daughter was getting ready to go into high school. I was at a point in my career, I did IT stuff where I could do IT stuff from anywhere. And so we started, we both put out resumes and started posting for jobs in Hong Kong and said, let's see if one of us gets a job offer. And of course, she did. She got a wonderful job offer with Apple, and said that's the win. you know, um, with a job offer like that, we can go. And so yeah, and the timing was right. So it was yeah, it wasn't a kind of spontaneous spur of the moment thing at all. It was something we had talked about for years. I think she was really worried that I would kind of freak out. Certainly the difference between Orlando and Hong Kong, maybe not quite as extreme as my Western Mass roots, but really extreme lifestyle difference. And so but yeah, I'd been there a few times. I kind of knew what I was signing up for. I had met all of her family, and so yeah, so we packed up our house in Florida. That was painful. We've been together for 27 years. We had this, big house with the pool and the, you know, 3-car garage and, a lot of stuff we'd accumulated over the years. And I had to pack it, sell it, get rid of it because it wasn't going with us to Hong Kong. So that was I guess, emotionally trying to wrap my brain around the fact that this isn't a trip. This is, we're going, we got to make the best of this. We're going to be there long term. And so, yeah, emptying the house and getting rid of all of that stuff was, yeah, I had memorabilia stuff. I remember I had this marionette I had bought in the early 80s, Mario, the marionette, that I had all those years, and I had to sell Mario. He wasn't going, he didn't make the list, we knew we had very limited space. So yeah, there was all my tools. I had a garage full of tools I'd accumulated over the years. And yeah, somebody even came in and bought the workbench at a garage sale, you know. all of it went. And so, yeah, yeah, no, it was emotional. Lots of stuff, yeah, it just didn't fit, but we got what we could take in a single container that then shipped to Hong Kong, literally the slow boat to China. So we got there a month ahead of our stuff. So we stayed in a service apartment for about a month, waiting for our belongings to arrive, and then we got an apartment, um, and that actually it wasn't bad at all. We had enough of our furnishings from Florida that that apartment felt like home, right? It had reminders, my couch, and so, pieces of furniture and bedside tables that, had come from Florida and stuff. So yeah, so it felt like home, and I adapted pretty quickly. I also found a job very quickly, which was really good. At the time, I had been living in Florida. I was working for EA, Electronic Arts, EA Sports. It's in the game. Um, Absolutely loved that job. Probably would still be working for EA if I hadn't moved, but we moved to Hong Kong. It disrupted my employment there, but I was fortunate in that I got one of my vendors that I had been outsourcing work to in China hired me as an account manager back to EA, and then I picked up some other accounts. So yeah, I was never actually unemployed. EA had given me some time through the move to try and figure out if I could either work remotely supporting teams in the U.S. or possibly pick up a role with their group. They had an office in Shanghai, but the office in Shanghai wanted me to work in Shanghai. And I said, all right, well, that doesn't really work. I can't commute between Hong Kong and Shanghai um, easily. So, yeah, but anyway, I picked up a job with a team in Suzhou, China, and I worked mostly from Hong Kong, and I would make trips up there a week or two at a time um, to work with the teams there. So it's all good. It worked.
Yeah, it definitely worked out because I know moving just different neighborhoods, different cities, difficult for a lot of people, right? To go across the waters, to go to a totally different experience, it shows how much confidence you both had in each other. It also shows courage from my perspective, where you're following your heart, your mind, your body, your soul. You're like, this is love. It's my power, and it's going to continue to fuel me in my marriage, and from that day and continue forward. For those who are looking to make a similar leap or similar jump, what advice would you provide to them in regards to making not only um, the change, moving from a different one country to another, but also not giving up hope that it's going to work out?
Yeah, so it really, I guess this sounds oversimplified, but it really truly is about putting your partner first, right? And just saying, I have, for me, right, I have kind of minimal needs, feed me, you know, and I'm okay, right? Um, and so yeah, this was so important to her and for her to be close to family. Now, my dad is still alive. He's 92. He's in Florida. And, of course, we were living in Florida before and, could see him a lot. Fortunately, we were there during the period when my mother passed. And so yeah, it is hard for me being so far away from my elderly father. We managed to get back there usually twice a year, hopefully to see him. And we do a lot of Zoom calls, right? So I guess my point there is you can work it out. It's a willingness thing, right? You just got to have this mindset that I'm going to put you first, um, and I know that you're going to take care of me, right? You got to trust, right? So my wife was very concerned about my well-being and my ability to adapt and giving me space. We also had our daughter in tow, um so actually that was you know it was so much harder on her at 14, moving from the US to Hong Kong and going to an international school. She was one of the only Americans there. And, um, so that kind of gave me something also to focus on, right? It wasn't about me, right? I had to help her. She hadn't even been able to, she wasn't part of this decision, right? This just kind of happened to her. And she was not happy about it. She tried to be happy about it till she got to school and then didn't like the school. And anyway, so yeah, you kind of put yourself aside a little bit and just go, yeah, this is important to the people I love and care about. And so I'm going to make the best of it myself. And as it turns out, I mean, I love the lifestyle in Hong Kong. Sometimes you just gotta, free your mind and go, I can't and shouldn't try to replicate in Hong Kong what I had in Florida, right? You have to embrace the new and go, what is here? How can I enjoy this? You know, Orlando's flat as a pancake. There's no mountains. Hong Kong is this mountainous tropical island. And so I got here and I started hiking, and I joined a hiking group. I started leading some hikes, and um, it was great. I was meeting people from all over the world. Super multicultural here, right? This is a finance hub for businesses from all over the world set up shop here, and so yeah, so truly just got to embrace life and say, okay, this is a new experience. What fun stuff can I find to do here, and and fun people can I meet, and yeah, we took care of each other through it. Now, it has not all been easy. And I will share with you, and you may have seen this analogy before. My wife taught me this many years ago, and we still kind of use it. The bank account analogy of a relationship, right? Everything we do with each other is potentially a withdrawal or a deposit to the account, right? You do something that's kind of disrespectful or just oblivious, it's a withdrawal, right? You do something that shows care and putting the other person first, it's a deposit, right? But if you're not paying attention, right? If you kind of get wrapped up in your world and doing your thing and focusing on work or whatever, you don't even realize all the little withdrawals you're making, right? And over time they accumulate, and yeah, the account goes empty, and then you're in serious trouble, right? If you haven't been making some deposits, because we all make withdrawals, right? We all do stuff that annoys our partner, right? Guilty as charged. I still do after 40 years together. I still, you know, do stuff that gets me in trouble, and so and deposits can be hard, right? Deposits is not about what I think is a deposit. It doesn't matter what I think. It only matters what she thinks is a deposit. And so yeah, I've been pretty clueless at times in our relationship and thinking I'm making deposits, and it turns out they tiny little, yeah, yeah, that was nice, but it wasn't meaningful enough. And so yeah, that's probably my biggest advice is in the busyness of life, don't forget to monitor the account, right? You're making withdrawals. You better be making some deposits, right? And you better be asking that question. How's the account, right? Are we okay? Um, is the account getting low? You can usually sense it, when the account's starting to get low. um, and yes, I got to focus, you know, and my wife does, she smacks me, you know, when if I make a major withdrawal or I haven't made a deposit in a while, she lets me know in no uncertain terms that I have work to do to right the ship.
Let me ask you one final question, Eric, before I let you go. But I want to give it to you in the form of three wishes.
Okay.
And you touched on it because I'm a big proponent of deposits and withdrawals because I love that analogy. It's something that I use in my relationship. What are three things you wish people knew about the power of communication in a relationship and why?
Three things I wish people knew. So, well, certainly, words are powerful, right? So I would say that my first thing is, be careful with your words, right? Choose your words, right? And when you're angry or upset, shut up. you know, just bad things come out of your mouth when you're, fired up. So that just makes it worse. That's just fuel on the fire. Okay. So yes, take a minute, calm yourself, think about what you're saying. Um, oh, and I loved this one in conflict, right? It's called issue, not tissue. So when you want to provide feedback to somebody, right? You talk about the issue it causes, not the tissue. The tissue is the personal attack, right? You don't care, right? That's a personal attack. You can say, oh, this thing happened and it had this impact on me, or it had this impact on us. That's the issue I want to address, is the impact it had, not you are the problem, right? And so the framing, the way you frame a criticism, because we do have to share. There are things that bother us and things that, annoy us, right? Things that are withdrawals that you think, they're just not aware this is a withdrawal, right? So you got to find a way to communicate that. But when you do, it has to be focus on the issue, not on the tissue, right? Don't go after the person, go after the effect